Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In Europe, the number of deaths from the new coronavirus has now crossed 100,000. Meanwhile, in the US, nearly 1,900 have died overnight as hundreds of Americans staged protests against the lockdowns in several cities. Globally, infection cases have exceeded 2.3 million, with nearly 161,000 fatalities. More in this report.
Now accounts for nearly two-thirds of the coronavirus fatalities worldwide. Experts says the number of confirmed infections is likely to be a fraction of actual cases, as many countries are testing only the most critical people. Italy and Spain remain the hardest hit in Europe, with the most number of deaths in the region. Germany has reported 184 new deaths in the past 24 hours, while in Turkey the number of confirmed cases has overtaken neighboring Iran for the first time. In Britain, the rapid swell of the outbreak has overwhelmed the National Health Services.
We've got to do more to get the PPE that people need to the front line. This is an extremely challenging situation. As you say, there's massive global demand for the equipment. This is a global pandemic, but we are trying to do everything we can to get the equipment that we need.
In the US and Brazil, hundreds of people have taken to the streets calling for authorities to resign over lockdown measures. But New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says data will dictate the strategy, not whims and wishes.
I think the president leaving it to the states was not just right and legal and constitutional. I think he's right that it's different in different places. Look, when we look at this state and we talk about reopening, we're going to talk about different strategies in different parts of the state, because the numbers dictate the strategy, and you have different numbers in different parts of the state.
Meanwhile, in South Korea, the number of infection cases has fallen for the first time to a single digit since the outbreak peaked in February.
Pakistan has reported 514 coronavirus infections in the past 24 hours, taking the total number of cases to almost 8,000. The health ministry said 159 people have died across the country, with 16 deaths reported since yesterday. The ministry says 63% of infections are locally transmitted. The ministry said 1,868 people have recovered, while 47 patients are in critical condition. Pakistan has started repatriating some of its citizens from the United Arab Emirates. On Saturday, the first flight carried 227 stranded passengers from Dubai and other Emirates to Islamabad. Meanwhile, the UK has announced financial support worth £2.67 million to Pakistan in the fight against the pandemic. British High Commissioner to Pakistan, Christian Turner, said the support is aimed at seriously ill and stronger testing system. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the Indian government is deliberately targeting Muslims to divert attention from the backlash against its COVID-19 policies. In a tweet, Khan said violence against Muslims reflects the racist ideology of Narendra Modi's government. He said the maltreatment of Muslims in India is akin to what Nazi Germany did to Jews. His tweet follows reports that Hindus and Muslims are being segregated at a hospital for coronavirus patients in India. This is despite millions of migrant workers in India being uniquely vulnerable to homelessness during the pandemic. India has also charged the chief of a Muslim seminary with culpable homicide for holding a gathering in New Delhi. Earlier this year, dozens of Muslims were killed during riots in Indian capital over the new citizenship law. Anti-Muslim sentiments have intensified across India, with media and the government accusing Muslims of spreading the COVID-19 virus. In another incident, a cancer hospital in Uttar Pradesh refused to accept Muslim patients unless they come in with a negative coronavirus test. In a newspaper advertisement, the hospital said the step has been taken for the security of the medical staff and the doctors. The hospital claims the number of virus patients has grown unexpectedly due to the Tablighi Jamaat gathering in New Delhi. The Indian Health Ministry has so far recorded 521 deaths and more than 16,000 coronavirus infections across the country. US President Donald Trump has warned China of consequences if it was knowingly responsible for the novel coronavirus pandemic. In a White House briefing, President Trump says such doubts have put a question mark over US relations with China. Trump also said Washington has good relations with both North Korea and Russia, saying US would have been at war with Pyongyang if he was not the president. The president said he doesn't foresee an increase in military tension with Moscow, not so much with Beijing. He said it is yet to be seen if COVID-19 in China mistakenly got out of control or was it done deliberately.
If they were knowingly responsible, certainly. If it was a mistake is a mistake. But if they were knowingly responsible, yeah, then there should be consequences. You're talking about, potentially lives like nobody's seen since 1917.
Iran says it will give a decisive response to any mistake by the United States in international waters. In a statement, the Revolutionary Guard said the U.S. must follow maritime protocols. They also dismissed U.S. reports of harassment by Iranian vessels as fake. Earlier, the U.S. military said 11 Iranian vessels came too close to the U.S. Guard ships in the Gulf, calling the move dangerous and provocative. Tensions soared in the region after a US airstrike in Baghdad killed Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani earlier this year. Iran retaliated by firing a dozen ballistic missiles at the Iraqi bases housing US troops. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif will leave for Damascus tomorrow to hold talks with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Abbas Mousavi said Zarif will also meet his Syrian counterpart during the one-day visit. In a statement, Mousavi said Zarif and the Syrian officials will discuss mutual ties and the regional fight against terrorism. Earlier, Iran's foreign ministry said Assad had emphasized on talks between Tehran and Damascus on recent developments. The ministry said Tehran has reiterated its support for the Republic of Syria. The Afghan government says its security forces have retaken Khumab district from the Taliban in northern Jozjan province. A provincial governor spokesman said 14 Taliban fighters, including their shadow deputy governor, were killed in the operation. The official said 10 other Taliban have been wounded in the operation, while one truck was seized from the fighters. He said another operation by security forces is underway in Karkin district of the same province. Earlier, National Security Council spokesperson Javed Faisal alleged Taliban have killed 24 civilians in the last week. He said fighters wounded 13 others, including women and children, across the country. The Taliban have not commented over any development yet. Libya's internationally recognized government says its forces have captured 102 fighters loyal to Commander Khalifa Haftar. They also seized heavy military equipment. GNA military said it has also captured areas of Al-Tawaisha and Salahuddin south of Tripoli. In another statement, the forces said they carried out 17 airstrikes on the strategic town of Taruna. Taruna is a major focal point for Haftar's militias in their onslaught against Tripoli. The UN-backed government launched Operation Peace Storm on March the 26th to counter Haftar's offensive. In Mali, people are voting in the final round of the legislative polls despite concerns of the coronavirus and militant threats. The elections have been repeatedly delayed as the country struggles with the militant revolt. Voters in the nation of the 19 million are casting their ballots in the runoff to elect 147 members of the National Assembly. The first round on March the 29th was disrupted by militant attacks and intimidation, including the kidnapping of opposition leader Soumaïla Cissé. The country has been plagued by conflict since 2012, when the rebels captured much of the Mali's arid north. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro says the legislative elections this year may be pushed back due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In a radio interview, Maduro said the fight against the outbreak is a priority and it is unwise to insist on scheduled polls under these circumstances. When asked about accepting aid from Colombia, Maduro said Venezuela will welcome anything that helps the health of citizens. Venezuela has so far reported 227 cases of COVID-19 and 9 deaths from the disease. In Indonesia, 9 people have died in a landslide at an illegal gold mine in the western Sumatra province. Officials said a group of 12 people, including a woman, were digging for gold at an abandoned mine in South Solok. District spokesman said 3 people keeping the watch reported to local authorities when the group failed to emerge from the mine. He said the bodies of deceased have been removed from the scene. The spokesperson said the victims were local farmers digging the gold without proper equipment or protective gear. In Ukraine, after being extinguished twice, radioactive wildfires around the defunct Chernobyl nuclear plant are raging again. The Interior Ministry says over 1,800 firefighters and 300 units of equipment are working in Kiev and Zhytomyr regions. Police said a huge fire was started by arsonists in the forests around Chernobyl earlier this month. It was put out this week, but new blazes broke, fanned by heavy winds. Ukraine's health ministry says there is no new radiation risk as yet from the fires and pollution. The raging fires have pushed pollution levels in Kiev to the worst in the world. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The Pentagon will extend the travel ban on service members to June 30th due to the novel coronavirus pandemic. During a briefing, an official said the new order, which is yet to be signed, includes eased restrictions and exemptions. The official said Defense Secretary Mark Esper will review the policy every 15 days. The original 60-day stop movement order was put in place last month in an attempt to curb the spread of the coronavirus among troops. It was set to expire on May the 11th. The Pentagon remains concerned about asymptomatic cases among the nearly 3,000 U.S. troops that have tested positive so far. Health authorities in Middle Eastern countries have reported new cases and related deaths from the novel coronavirus. The UAE has recorded 479 new coronavirus cases, 98 recoveries, and 4 deaths. More in this report.
Kuwait has confirmed 164 new cases, bringing the total to 1,915. Oman reported 86 new cases, taking the total to 1,266, with 57 new recoveries. In Egypt, health officials registered 19 additional deaths for a total of 224, including 3,032 cases. Jordan's tally rose to 413, with 6 new COVID-19 cases diagnosed in the past 24 hours. Palestine has recorded 6 new virus cases, bringing the total to 430 infected people. Lebanon reported only 1 new case of COVID-19, with the total reaching 673. Health officials in Iraq said 1 additional death raised its figure to 82, including 1,513 cases. Iraq says it will ease some regulations during Ramadan in certain areas. Meanwhile, Israel's coronavirus death toll has reached 171.
The World Health Organization says the rapid spread of COVID-19 in Africa over the past week is worrisome. Director General of WHO, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, has urged the international community to support Africa to combat the crisis. More in this report.
The WHO said there has been a 51% increase in the number of reported cases in Africa over the past week. It added there has been a 60% increase in the number of reported deaths. Sudan's health ministry said 30 new cases were reported over the past 24 hours, bringing the total number to 66 with 10 deaths. Ghana's information ministry said COVID-19 statistics are at 641 with 5 new cases recorded and 8 deaths. The Nigerian president's chief of staff, Abba Kyari, died on Friday after contracting the new coronavirus. The national tally in Nigeria hits 493 as national testing strategy rolled out in the country. In Cameroon, there have been 922 cases and 21 deaths, but many fear the real number of confirmed cases is more than 1,000. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention said it planned to distribute 1 million COVID-19 test kits in the continent. The organization said kits will be distributed in the next week to help African countries address the shortfall.
Chinese state media has revealed key information related to the early stages of the novel coronavirus outbreak in the city of Wuhan. This includes consultation reports of the city's first 7 patients, along with details about their symptoms and actions taken by the medics. More in this report.
Zhang Jixian, a veteran respiratory physician at the Hubei Provincial Hospital, was among the first to treat patients afflicted with an unknown new disease in late December. Today, the world knows that new disease as COVID-19, which has disrupted life across the globe. Jixian describes the first patient's symptoms.
Fever increasing for 10 days, 3 days of chest pains before coming to the hospital. The red sounds were thick in both lungs and the left lower lobe has moist crackles. Neither of the patient's legs were swollen.
The doctor says she suspected the new disease was viral in nature, but she is quick to add she never thought it would turn into a global pandemic.
At first, I thought it might be an infectious disease, but I didn't expect it to be so contagious as it is now, or to spread as widely and as far. Now the pandemic is severe, with huge casualties. We really didn't expect the situation to become this bad. We only thought it might be infectious at the very beginning.
When asked why Chinese citizens and the rest of the world wasn't warned about the virus in December 2019, Jixian points out she and her team were dealing with a completely new virus. As such, revealing unproven information to the public could have had disastrous consequences. She says only giving out details once they had been proven was the responsible thing to do, regardless of what some world leaders might have to say.
The UAE and other Gulf markets have started the week on a higher note, led by a jump in Dubai bourse and Abu Dhabi index. The positive sentiments on the regional bourses were on the back of gains in the US stocks on Friday. Dubai stocks led the way with 3.5% over gains made by property stocks. Abu Dhabi was up by more than 2.5%, led by Ishraq Investment, Abu Dhabi Shipbuilding and First Abu Dhabi Bank. Saudi Arabia's Tadawul, the largest bourse in the Gulf region, was also up 0.5% after opening. Bursa Kuwait also made a strong start to the week, rising almost 1.5%. Qatar Stock Exchange too gained over 1%, while Bahrain index was nearly unchanged. The European Central Bank says it will take further action to keep prices stable, if necessary, amid COVID-19 pandemic. In an interview, ECB policymaker François Villeroy said the bank has the mandate to ensure price stability under the EU treaties. Villeroy said with inflation below ECB's 2% target, the bank will have to keep interest rates low and liquidity abundant. Meanwhile, Germany says it may be able to manage the fiscal impact of the pandemic without exceeding approved debt levels. Germany's finance minister Olaf Scholz said the silver lining depends on the economy recovering in the second half of the year. Meanwhile, Eurozone bailout fund says Europe will need $543 billion to finance recovery, in addition to the agreed $587 billion. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.